includes immigrants. And I've had the idea for a really long time, way before COVID and way before all the crazy changes with immigration that we're experiencing right now, to just have basic sessions on immigration law that are accessible to all of the recruiters, all of the various professionals working in the HR world, to make it more accessible to you and easy for you to understand, to what we call demystify the immigration process. And I'd like to start with a story that it just exemplifies why I wanted to do it in Pittsburgh. And there are lots of different people on this call. I was watching the people as they were joining today. And so there are few who are my clients and deal with immigration day in and day out for many years. You're very experienced. I really appreciate your support and coming to support me today. And please feel free to ask any questions that you may have, but you really experts on this call. And there are people who probably never deal with immigration and just want to understand how they can increase the hiring of foreign nationals. So my story goes as such. A year ago, about exactly a year ago, I was in New York City waiting for my daughter's baby shower, which was taking place in New York. And I have a friend who moved from Pittsburgh to New York, and he is a hairstylist. And once in a while, if I'm in New York and I have time, I go see him. So this was the day when we went to Brooklyn, and my daughter was getting a highlights, a younger daughter, not the one who was having a baby. And since highlights take a long time, I was sitting in the corner of that hair salon for quite a long time. And I was eavesdropping on a conversation between a hairstylist and a client in the next chair. They were regular people. They were not working in HR. And they had the most sophisticated conversation about H1B visa. And I realized that that can only happen in New York because everybody there is a foreign national. Everybody there wants to be, in the know and kind of understands that the world is global, and that's about New York. And they were having a conversation about really complicated issues of H1B visa, and the hairdresser was understanding what the client was saying, and the client was just retelling story about her girlfriend. It wasn't like she was an HR. And I understood that that can never happen in Pittsburgh, but I'd like for that to happen in Pittsburgh, or I'd like at least for people to stop asking me when am I going home, or why do I still have this accent and I've been here for so long. And we know that these are not the most appropriate questions. We're quite in the audience to understand this, but I still would like you to understand how the recruitment of foreign nationals works. Ask any question that you may have so that we may make it easier. And why we are talking about it, because there are a lot of foreign nationals in the United States who are eligible to work. So it has been estimated by the Migration Policy Institute that there are over 420,000 of H1B workers. And just this week, because of all of the changes with immigration and ban on all new H1B and H4 and H2B visas, the Immigration Service issued the statistics that there are actually over 538,000 of H1B workers in the United States. We also, living in Pittsburgh, see how many foreign students we have. And because I invited clients and friends to register for this webinar, we have people from all over the country, Texas, California, New York. So of course you're familiar with foreign students as well. And so there are, in the past school year, there were over 220,000 students who were eligible to work in the United States. So that we know that there are way over 1,300,000 foreign students in the United States at any given time. Not now, of course, during COVID, and we don't know how the next school year will go. But generally, there are lots of people who are eligible to work. Next, we, again, living in Pittsburgh and having great healthcare system, quite aware of how many foreign healthcare workers are in the United States. So over 20% of American surgeons are foreign born, and the same goes for the pharmacists and dentists and all kinds of other practitioners. And there are 20 states in the country that have extreme shortage of primary care physicians. And because I saw that there are a lot of registrants for our webinar were from UPMC and UPMC recruitment, I thought it's especially important. And of course, immigrants come at all kinds of different levels. We're not necessarily just talking about the top, the most specialized professionals. There are people who come as refugees and asylees and are eligible to work. There are people from certain countries who are granted temporary protected status and have employment authorization. And so all of those people are able to work and you're able to hire them. And of course, with foreign students, you know, there's so many of them who are eligible to work in the United States. I just wanted you to have the statistics so you understand the massive scale of how many people are able to work in the United States and how many you can actually hire. The majority of foreign students, of course, come from India and China. Those who stay in the United States, go to graduate school, go to technical degrees such as STEM degrees, and they're eligible for 36 months of employment authorization. The Trump administration and the most recent proclamation was going to take away most of that practical training component, but it luckily didn't happen. The academia had amazing lobby, and so the OPT, or optional practical training component of the student visa, has survived. So the students can continue to work in the United States. Again, 36 months, that's a long time. That's long enough time to get most of them a different work visa and sometimes to even get them a green card. So lots of companies hire foreign recruitment process. When do immigration law questions arise, right? So most of you, again, maybe you're dealing with immigration day in and day out in global mobility, you know all about it. And some of you know very little about it. So obviously in the recruitment process, in the completion of Form I-9, and we'll talk quite a bit about Form I-9 because that's where the employment eligibility really starts. And even though it seems like a simple form, and even though that form is usually relegated to the lowest person on the totem pole in the HR department, not even HR generalist, some sort of coordinator or assistants, that form is never completed correctly. People think that they know what to do with it, and it's never completed correctly. So I would very much encourage you to learn more about Form I-9 and to learn more about the recruitment process of foreign nationals. The other very short story that I hadn't wanted to mention, and it's not necessarily to make anybody feel bad, but obviously when people learn that I'm an immigration lawyer, they always tell me their immigration story, whether it's at an internations event, a Allegheny conference event, any kind of large social gathering, right? So in Pittsburgh, people are very afraid to hire foreign nationals. Maybe somebody had a bad experience, realized that it was very difficult to get a visa later on, and decided that it's not worth it because you can't keep an employee, and people get so emotional about their inability to stay in the United States. But what was happening here, we get quite a few expats. Maybe we don't realize it on a city scale, but immigrants is what kept our city afloat. We would have had a net loss of the population if not for Mads and Ads and foreign nationals who came to work here. We really owe gratitude to UPMC, to Allegheny General, to Highmark, to Pitt, CMU, and all the other universities who brought foreign nationals to work here. And that's what sustained our population. That's why we don't have a net loss. But some companies are very good at hiring foreign nationals because they have maybe an expert on staff who understands visa categories or has an immigration lawyer on the speed dial or understands how the process works, and some don't. So the expats that started coming for our Marcellus Shale, gas exploration companies, there are some Spanish companies that bought, global companies that bought operations, and they came with spouses, and their spouses are highly professional. So here's just a story. So a high-level HR director came to work in the Marcellus Shale. Her husband is a credit manager. He worked at companies like Heinz and like Nestle all of his life, has perfect English, and he assesses how much credit does the company have, how much money can they borrow, something that's very relevant to local companies. He would go through the interview, and at the end, when the company would find out that he is spouse of a foreign national expat, and even though he has employment authorization, the companies would not be interested in him. Even though his employment authorization can be extended for up to 7 years, there is no issue with his ability to work. But what is more upsetting to us is not only that, let's say, he wasn't hired, but recruiters and high-level recruiters were texting him on his phone immigration-related questions. So everybody is very sensitive to discrimination based on national origin. And people understand that it's not a cool idea to ask somebody, where are you from? What's your status here? That you have to be careful with asking questions. What is their immigration status? But they were not afraid to ask those questions in text. So I beg you, don't do that, okay? There are specific questions that you can and cannot ask in the recruitment of foreign nationals. There is no reason to expose your company and for all the other companies talk behind your back that somebody that is multinational corporation in Pittsburgh doesn't know what they're doing because they're texting a prospective hire and asking him what is his immigration status through a text. Please don't do that. So when you hire foreign nationals, there are specific questions that you can ask, and there is no reason why you should be too shy, right? So if somebody says that they are a foreign national and they will need employment sponsorship, right? So they open the door. Once the door is open, please don't be timid. Don't be shy. You're not discriminating anybody based on national origin. The person told you they need employment sponsorship. You want this employee. So you need to understand, is this a foreign student who is authorized to work after graduation for a specific period of time, like 12 months, or can be extended for another 24 months if it's a STEM degree? And an employer participates in EVerify. There are several requirements for that. But is it somebody who can work for quite a few years? Is it somebody who, for example, is from a specific country and it's not that difficult for us to get this person a visa? We need in recruitment to have at least some fluency in immigration to understand how to hire high thought after foreign workers. We have so many companies like Aptiv recruiting 300 engineers in Pittsburgh. There is no way you're going to find all American engineers to fill 300 spots in this city. Same with Uber, same with Google, same with everybody else. Out of all the companies here, if you were looking at the recent data, only Uber had some layoffs. The unemployment in the IT and computer industry currently is 2.8%. So it's very, very low. It's not really affected by COVID. It's not affected by the downturn in the economy very much. We still need highly specialized foreign nationals to work. So if let's say you don't have to hire foreign nationals, there is no obligation for a company to say that you have to hire foreign nationals. Many companies have a policy and say, we don't do employment sponsorship. We just don't do it. I can't tell you what the rationale is and how they square it with their diversity and inclusion initiatives. I personally don't understand it, not because I'm an immigration lawyer, but because I think just people don't know how to do it and don't want to spend resources and allocate resources to learn. But it's really not that difficult. So again, if the person say that they are here on a visa, that's it. You can ask any question you want. It's not discriminatory. You can ask a question that say, will you now or in the future require employment sponsorship? Because lots of people, even foreign students, don't want to necessarily admit that they need employment sponsorship. So they say, I'm authorized to work for any employer. I have employment authorization. I can come and work today. Well, that's great. But you should still ask, will they require sponsorship in the future? Because the student employment sponsorship is going to end. And even H1B visa is not forever, right? So again, when the door is open, don't be shy, don't be timid. Maybe in the first few cases, if you want to ask immigration lawyer, reach out, do so. And again, we want people in Pittsburgh to be educated in hiring. We want to hire and fill as many positions as we can. So we're just doing it as a community initiative. On the Form I-9, like I said, seems to be a simple form, one pager. Most mistakes you've ever seen in your life. Nobody understands the documents. Somebody tells you that a passport is a list A document because it verifies both identity and employment eligibility of the applicant. Well, that's great, but citizen and gives you a passport, that's the only document you need to complete Form I-9. But when you see a foreign passport, the story just starts. The story doesn't end with foreign passport. And I see so many mistakes when just a foreign passport was used or just I-94 card was used, but the visa wasn't looked at. The status wasn't looked at. And guess what? The Immigration Service actually publishes a lot of resources on their website, uscis.gov, and they have an amazing publication called Handbook for Employers. It's called M-274. That's the form they assign to this publication. It changes once in a while, but it has been in a constant format for a long time. I highly recommend anybody who deals with foreign nationals, anybody who deals with recruitment, print this document from the uscis.gov, keep it in your drawer. It's very small, you can bind it very easily with a, paper clip. And it tells you all about different visa categories. What document would a person have? What will correspond to their immigration status? And so that helps you to understand what you need to complete Form I-9. So lots of questions to lawyers actually could have been eliminated, and companies don't need to spend money and time on reaching out to immigration lawyer if you just looked at the Handbook for Employers. I also wanted to put several slides into the presentation about the impact of COVID, because it's the first time in history where, lots of us, most of us have been working from home all the time. And so obviously you couldn't inspect the documents and complete part 2 of Form I-9 as it's generally required. So if you remember anything about the I-9s from this presentation, just remember, write COVID-19 everywhere in this form, and any of your mistakes will be basically forgiven, because if you completed this form during COVID, there is a lot of forgiveness. You are allowed to review the documents of the new hire over Zoom, over FaceTime, whatever resource you want. You're not required to look at the original documents because obviously everybody started working from home. So again, write COVID-19, you didn't inspect the original documents, that's fine. The Immigration Service said that once the companies reopen, you will have to fix whatever hasn't been fixed once the company goes back. And obviously it's not possible to fix all the Forms I-9 within 3 days when the company goes back to work in person. Don't worry about it. You're owed COVID-19, that's fine. The other issue to remember is that the Immigration Service allowed, and the Department of Labor, allowed to complete Forms I-9 late, and first it was only until June 19th. But now they said if the majority of the company is still working remotely, don't worry about it, you can complete I-9 form later. So again, there is a lot of flexibility in it, and there will not be any audits during COVID. Nobody is going to hold you to the standard. But I think the biggest issue is just to understand somebody's immigration status, when will they have new employment authorization, and just explain to the hiring manager what they can and cannot expect, what's realistic with this particular hire or this employee, what we can anticipate here. Again, EVerify also made all kinds of excuses due to COVID, so you don't have to put anybody's documents in EVerify right away. And as people with existing visas will start arriving to the United States, hopefully by the end of the summer, because let's say they got the visa before COVID in February, but were never able to enter the United States since March. So somebody who was stuck in Central America, Latin America, Europe, they may not get Social Security number right away. And that has been a big issue holding some employers from putting people on the payroll. Please don't worry about it. Social Security is not a required document. Yes, when you pay taxes, you're required to allocate them to a specific Social Security number, but you can use initially a dummy number and then change it, because Social Security was obviously closed up until now. And even now you need to call them and verify, are they open, are they accepting new applications, because they weren't open at all, and you still have to call and find out. Again, Social Security is not a mandatory document for somebody to start working, and it's not mandatory for an expat who came to the United States to have the number right away to get paid. You can use a dummy number. Your payroll manager may not like it, but it's inevitable. Nothing we can do during this time. So now we're going to move into the actual nitty-gritty of this demystifying hiring of foreign nationals and talk about different visa categories, right? So in terms of the visa categories, we call them the alphabet soup, because in the United States, every visa is defined by a letter from the alphabet and sometimes the number. So I put the basic categories here, and I think I'm going to go through all of them. If you would like a copy of my presentation, email me, happy to share. You don't need to memorize all the visa categories. It's probably impossible to expect, but you need to know just at least the basics. What exists in the United States? Whom can we hire? How do we hire these people, right? You don't need to rely to one knowledge person at the company, and if that person is out or not available, then you don't know what to do. I think everybody should have this basic literacy on what our visa system is in our country. So we have F1 foreign students. F1 stands for a foreign student. So all the students you see in Squirrel Hill and Shadyside in Oakland, if they're foreign, they have an F1 visa. When they graduate, they're eligible for what's called OPT, Optional Practical Training Component of a Student Visa. We allow students to stay here for up to 12 months and practice the skills that they've learned in the United States over the past 4 or 5 years, whatever it was. If they graduate from a master's degree, they get another 12 months. If they graduate from a PhD degree, they get another 12 months. If they graduated with a degree in a STEM discipline, so it was specifically marked as a STEM in their Form I-20, then they're eligible for an additional period of 24 months of that OPT training. So they graduated from a bachelor's degree, they had 12 months, they're eligible for 24 months more. They graduated from a master's degree in engineering, they get 12 months and then additional 24 months. So you can be here, theoretically 12 years or more in an F1 status. Most people don't, but it is theoretically possible. So high-level researchers, somebody who came here as an undergrad and stayed, they can stay here for a long time. We will talk in detail about H1B visa, because H1B is our most popular work visa in the United States. It's basically a default category for work in the United States is H1B, and we'll talk in detail about that. O1 is a visa for extraordinary ability, and that extraordinary ability can be in arts or it can be in sciences. It can also be in education and it can be in business. The easiest, of course, if it's in sciences. It is a temporary visa category, originally category for athletes to come to the United States and compete in the Olympic Games, for example, or in the soccer championship or hockey championship, right? So even the Canadians who come to the United States, they need a visa. They may not necessarily get a visa sticker in their passport because they're Canadians, but they need to be authorized to work in the United States. So Form I-9 applies to everybody since 1986. Anybody working in the United States needs Form I-9, no exceptions, right? So O1, extraordinary ability, but of kind of temporary nature. Like I have a project, we are developing a COVID vaccine at the University of Pittsburgh, and without this researcher, I'm not going to develop the vaccine. So that researcher is eligible for O1 visa. It's pretty basic, Yes, there are a lot.
Ellen, I believe we lost you there for a moment.
Sorry, I'm just checking. Can you hear me now?
I can hear you now, yes.
Okay, all right, okay, sorry. I don't know what it was, so I started checking. Because I'm sharing my screen, I apologize. So I can't see anything. I cannot even see if I have an internet connection on my computer. I have it on my phone laying next to me, so I'm assuming that internet is working. So at what point did you lose me?
You were just finishing up talking about O1.
Okay, so I didn't say much more. I just said that we just want to understand what are the basic requirements, that it's extraordinary abilities. So somebody who has not necessarily PhD, even master's degree can qualify, but somebody who you see as contributing something unique to the United States, the O1 may be possible. The next one is an H3 visa category. Interesting visa category in today's time, because under the presidential proclamation of June 22nd, the trainee type of visa that's called J1, exchange visitor visa, has been banned, but H3 still exists. So H3 visa applies to corporations. If you are a corporation and you are bringing somebody who is a junior, maybe somebody like that student who graduated from school but doesn't have much experience, or especially a foreign student, somebody who graduated from a university abroad, but has interesting skills, and you are willing to train this person, and after training, they're going to take the skills that they learn in the United States to your operations abroad. But you need to train the managers, you need to train certain professionals in the United States on the way the company is doing business, on the way that we like things to be done, right? And what's interesting about this H3 visa, you can do it in increments. You can bring somebody here, train them for a few months, let's say, and then send them back so they can practice the skills that they have learned. And then they can come back again to the United States for a few months and practice again. So that's something that is definitely possible, still exists, and this kind of visa is good for up to 2 years. So you can train somebody in the United States, doesn't need to be the most sophisticated worker. The E3 and H1B1 visas. So United States entered in a series of treaties or agreements. So we have visas with specific countries available to citizens of specific countries. So E3 is a visa for Australians. So it's normally would be an H1B, but an H1B for Australians. So if an H1B visa is available only on October 1 of each year, and if it's only for so many people and there is a competition for this visa, you can hire Australians any day of the year, as long as this Australian has a college degree or equivalent of a college degree, and as long as the position requires a college degree. E3 visas are not scrutinized as much as H1B, they're not denied as much as H1B, and there are plenty of Australians, researchers, again, engineers, computer professionals who are quite interested working in the United States, and they apply for that visa directly at American embassies and consulates abroad. If they came to the United States, a financial analyst, found a job in Pittsburgh, they don't need to go all the way back to Australia to get a visa. They can actually go to Canada. Not today, when the Canadian border is closed for the rest of this month, but hopefully it will reopen, and once it reopens, the consulate will resume operations, so they can go back and apply for the visa later this year, but theoretically it's always possible. H1B visa is, again, it's the H1B, but guess what? It's for Chileans and Singaporeans. Quite random countries, why we entered into agreements that have visas with only those two countries, but anytime you see somebody from Chile or Singapore, you can hire that person, and it's easy. The visa available any day of the year. There are 6,800 H1B1 visas available each year. They've never been exhausted. They're always available. And again, no reason to go to the immigration service, seek approval, very easy to apply for the visa sticker. The E1 and E2 visa apply only to a small portion of companies. In order to qualify for this type of treaty visas, the company has to be foreign owned. So think about in Pittsburgh, there are a lot of German owned companies, right? Like we always thought about Bear is gone, but there are lots of other companies that are still foreign owned. And sometimes we don't even know, but there are companies that are British owned or French owned or Dutch owned, like Mylan, right? Because as long as they're listed on a foreign stock exchange, that's the company that has the nationality of that country. And that means that this company can hire nationals of that country to work in Pittsburgh. Like we have, I'm trying to think of easy examples, but we have Belgian-owned companies, we have some Dutch-owned companies in Pittsburgh. Again, not as many, but they're all members of the Allegheny Conference. I'm sure that we have a list, and those companies always know who they are because they get directions from their headquarters abroad. So that's how they bring their employees, and that's how Bayer used to bring German nationals to work in Pittsburgh using the E2 visa. The E2 visa is based on the investment that's made into the United States by foreign companies to conduct business here. And it's required to be a substantial investment, but it doesn't need to be a great investment. Like, there is a company in Pittsburgh doing a lot of business with PNC Bank currently called Singular. So Singular is a Spanish company. And because they have this registration with the American Embassy in Madrid, it allows them to bring Spanish citizens to work in Pittsburgh. So there are at least 50 Spaniards working downtown Pittsburgh who are working at PNC, and they're all high-level IT professionals. The benefit of that visa is that it's available right away, and their spouses are authorized to work in the United States once they got employment authorization. So again, as a recruiter, if you see somebody applying for the job and say, I'm a spouse of L1, or I'm a spouse of E1 or E2, these people are authorized to work in the United States once they secured an employment authorization document. And that employment authorization document is your List A document for Form I-9. Very easy to use, very easy to hire those individuals. The J1 visa category encompasses 13 types of people. They are professors, they are exchange visitors, they are camp counselors, they are summer workers, they are short-term scholars, so all kinds of people, and au pairs. Unfortunately, that visa got kind of halved, I would say, by the presidential proclamation of April 22nd. So summer workers, trainees, au pairs, camp counselors will no longer be able to come to the United States. But anybody who was working in research or at universities are still quite available. And so that category remains intact. And we will talk quite a bit about the L1A and L1B visa categories. Those are intercompany transfers. So they're available for companies who have operations abroad. And again, those don't need to be foreign-owned companies. These are American companies like Mine Safety Appliances that has operations all over the world. They can bring employees from their foreign operations into the United States. Again, this particular visa is currently subject to the proclamation, so nobody's coming until the end of this year. But there are plenty of people who are working here in this status, and they're not going anywhere. They're here. They can change employers and go work from, let's say, Mine Safety Appliances to PPG. They can only work for the company with which they had this relationship when we're working abroad. But if you have operations abroad or thinking about opening operations abroad, you will be able to bring employees from those operations into the United States. Again, there are people on this call who are very sophisticated when it comes to immigration and been doing quite a bit of it, whether it's relocation, whether it's global mobility, and there are some that know very little. So this slide applies to those who are just starting in the field or want to know how the field works. So this is how American immigration system works. We have a system of temporary visas. So people come in a non-immigrant status to be here temporarily as a non-immigrant. And then they become lawful permanent residents or green card holders. That's what's known as a green card, right? That's somebody who is here permanently, can work here indefinitely. And then there is, of course, US citizenship. So there is no such a thing as just getting US citizenship. You can't just get to it directly. It's a pathway of at least 10 years to get to that point. And for somebody who was born in India and China, it can take up to 70 years currently, so hopefully just 20. But you've seen that why we have so many H1B workers, it's not because we allow so many H1B workers, it's because they've been stuck in the country waiting for their green cards for the last 15 years. So most of the people that you would come in contact with started as foreign students, or they started in the J1 status as exchange visitor, or a lot of the times in the TN status. That's a status that's available for somebody from Mexico or Canada, because we have NAFTA. So NAFTA is still in place, and under NAFTA, nationals of Canada and Mexico can come and work in the United States for up to 3 years at a time. if their position, it's based on their position that has to be found in the addendum to NAFTA. So Mexico, United States, and Canada got together and said, what are our shortage occupation? Well, nurses, teachers, computer professionals, engineers. And so based on those occupations, we devised the list. So all kinds of scientists are on this list, all kinds of engineers, computer professionals, university professors. There are some odd occupations like as well, and all the medical professions are on it as well. So that's how people from Mexico and Canada can work in the United States. Then most of the time they get an H1B visa because it's a more solid temporary visa. It's available for up to 6 years, and it allows you to travel, apply for the green card, and do all kinds of things. In the past, people would complete their green card process sometimes in the United States and sometimes outside of the United States through an immigrant visa process or consular processing at American embassies and consulates. The presidential proclamation of April 22nd put an end to any immigrant visa processing for anybody. So that part is not available, but adjustment of status is still available in the United States, so people are still able to complete the process. As you understand, and as I was mentioning, immigration framework changes. There has been 183 changes to immigration law since the Trump administration. And yesterday they published in the Federal Register the proposal on many, many more changes to immigration laws, including making changes to student visa category and to H1B visa category. But those changes are not proposed until December 2020, and who knows what will happen by that time. There are lots of different agencies which are involved in the immigration process. That's what makes it complicated, because there are so many different hands in the pot. So it's not just one agency that controls the whole process and understands what's going on. Rather, we have the USCIS that deals with immigration benefits. We have CBP that is on the border, so that's when Canadians and Mexicans come into the United States, or when any foreign visitor transitions to the airport and seeks admission into the country. We have Department of State that issues visa stickers and controls non-immigrant and immigrant visas. And of course, Department of Labor that controls the test of the labor market and has a big part both in H1B visa process and in the green card process. I have quite a few slides in my presentation on L1 visa. I'm going to skip through them now because it applies to a small percentage of companies. So some of you are quite sophisticated and already know what it is. And for some of you, if you want to look at the presentation, you'll be able to read about what the requirements are. This visa is on hold because of the presidential proclamation. I'll cover the H1B visa very quickly, and then Laura will open it for questions, maybe 5-10 minutes before we're ready to finish. And if there are no questions, I can return and cover the additional material. But hopefully you do have questions and I'll be able to answer them. So I started in my introduction to the alphabet soup of visas that H1B is the most common work visa category in the United States. It's called the specialty occupation visa category. And there's 3 basic requirements for that visa. So the position must require at the minimum a college degree. A foreign national applying for the job must either have an actual college degree in the field that fits the position, or they have to have progressively responsible work experience that equals to that college degree. So both the Department of Labor and the Immigration Service say that 12 years of progressively responsible work experience is equivalent to a college degree. And you can use a combination. So somebody went to school in Ireland or India, a lot of the times they get what's called a 3-year degree. It's not equivalent to American bachelor's degree, but they also have years of experience. So we are able to hire an academic credentials evaluation company that would issue a determination saying that the 3-year Irish degree or Indian degree, together with documented employment verification letter, which confirms at least 3 years of work experience, is equivalent to a college degree. And such foreign national would qualify to apply for an H1B visa. The final requirement for H1B visa is that the employer must be willing to pay what's called prevailing wage in the industry. And prevailing wage is generally determined by the Department of Labor. Every year on July 5, they publish new prevailing wage data. And this year, they were supposed for the first time to change the occupational classifications or job families, because what they have currently is extremely outdated. It's way more than 10 years old. And all of the new occupations of technology managers, biostatisticians, all kinds of new occupations in artificial intelligence and data management that came out in the last 10 years are missing from the Department of Labor data. They recognize it, but I guess because of COVID and all kinds of cuts and lack of human resources, they're delaying it by 1 more year. So pretty much every year they're delaying it, so they're delaying it again. And in Pittsburgh, we don't have any issues with meeting the prevailing wage. The data that the Department of Labor collects for our Allegheny, Beaver, Butler, Washington counties, pretty low. And the employers are really competing for this worker, so the prevailing wage is not going to be your issue. I specifically put a slide that defines what is a specialty occupation, because that has been a cornerstone of a lot of the requests for additional evidence and denials from the Immigration Service when they claim that somebody is not qualifying for H1B status because this is not a specialty occupation. And in the past 3 years, the Immigration Service has decided that financial analysts, computer systems analysts, and market research analysts are not specialty occupations. They're getting sued constantly. There are lots of litigation on the denial of H1B petitions, and a lot of them are being won. But those are difficult cases and have to be very well documented. Again, in the Pittsburgh area, you see so many H1B petitions for SAP professionals, for data managers, for biostatisticians. These people are clearly super sophisticated. There is no question that they qualify for an H1B status, and don't be afraid of those H1B petitions. Again, our robotics industry, artificial intelligence, all these graduates from Carnegie Mellon, there are lines of companies that want to hire them. It's not an issue to document. The prevailing wage has 4 different levels and generally are assigned based on how junior or senior the person is. The proposed new regulations want to eliminate the 4 levels and limit them to 2 and allow companies to only hire the most highly paid H1B workers. That's the Trump idea of fair system. But I have to tell you that years ago, I had an oil trader in Houston. He was making $800,000. And when I explained to him that his petition will be subject to the visa lottery, he just couldn't understand what I was saying and kept saying, does your government not want my taxes? So there are plenty of very highly paid people who are in the system and want to apply for H1B visa, very high level managers at all of our insurance companies. And again, prevailing wage is not a problem. We have, in a way, an addition to the H1B system. So it's a very limited system. There are only 65,000 of H1B visas that are granted a year. And about 10 years ago, the Congress allowed 20,000 additional numbers for graduates of American graduate schools. There are many more graduates of American schools than 20,000. So there are plenty of people who are applying for H1B visas. We talked about the exception for Chile and Singapore, how it's always available. And H1B visas become available on October 1, because as you know, American government celebrates New Year on October 1 and not January 1. You always hear in September all kinds of fights about the appropriations bill and the budget for the next year. And H1B petitions can be filed 6 months before the start date. And that's where April 1 comes in, where H1B petitions are filed usually on April 1. This year, the Immigration Service completely changed the cap system, but generally we, for all the history, always filed them on April 1, and so that you understand that April 1 is not a random day, it's just 6 months before the start of the government fiscal year. And this is just a statistical data on how many H1B cases are filed. So we knew that this year was the changes that the government made, where they allowed everybody to apply online by paying just $10 for a kind of pre-lottery system. And then they decided who won the lottery, and only those who won were filing actual petitions. So the lottery system was operational between March 1 and March 20th. The COVID closures pretty much started like March 13th. So if not for COVID, there would have been a lot more H1B visas submissions filed this year. They weren't filed because in the second week of this open period, a lot of companies realized that, oh boy, we're going to work from home. We don't know what will be happening. We don't know how long we're going to work from home. And a lot of them stopped the filing. But nevertheless, look at the numbers. That's the shortage of highly occupied workers in the United States. No employer wants to go and spend extra $6,000 on hiring an H-1B worker and go through the headache of paperwork, filings, dealing with a nervous employee if they didn't have to do it. So it's clear that we just have a shortage of those workers, and the current proclamation banning all of them from coming into the United States is going to have only the outsourcing impact. I call it the Canada Job Creation Act, because we're already seeing, a number of people moving to Canada because their system is so much more welcoming and so much easier for highly qualified professionals. So the H1B cap of this year, on one hand, it was a blessing because of COVID. Since we didn't have to file all of the cases in the first, on April 1, people were paralyzed, and especially, immigration law firms in places like New York, New Jersey, Connecticut, California, in the Bay Area. We were fully functioning here, and I'm fully set up to work from home, but it wasn't for everybody, right? And people had to run around and buy computer equipment for all of their employees, internet connection, and high quality printers with fast output. So it really helped because of the COVID situation that we were able to just file registrations, but the registration information was very difficult and challenging because it was created at the last minute. And it didn't work with any of the immigration services systems, so they had to create a new category of the registrant for the employers. And even their receipt notices, when the cases started being accepted into the system, instead of the name of employer, like Cavastra, it had the name of the person who signed for the petition or registered in the system on behalf of the company. So then they had to correct those receipt notices, and it's been a challenge. So far, it worked. And the Immigration Service gave 90 days to companies and their attorneys to file actual petitions. So again, with COVID and the closures and working from home, it helped because people had up until yesterday to file those petitions in H1B Lottery. And so far, we've seen a very good result. For the petitions that we filed, we had almost 70% acceptance rate. Not sure how that happened. And, was such a, there are 85,000 H1B numbers. There were 275 submissions. But it seems that the ones that were better prepared or easier for them to adjudicate went in. I'm going to let Laura open the room for questions, and then only if there are no questions, I will continue. Thank you.
So Ellen, it looks like we do have our first question. In hiring foreign nationals and going through the Department of Labor's process, is there still a requirement to advertise a position for between 30 to 45 days to see if there are any US citizen applicants? And if that pool is exhausted, or has the Department of Labor decided not to require that anymore?
So I would say that the biggest myth in the United States that I hear every day is about this recruitment for American workers as part of the H1B process. It does not exist. It just does not exist. It's a myth, okay? So the test of the labor market exists for green cards. If you're sponsoring a foreign national employee for a green card, in most of the cases, unless exception to a general rule applies, you will have to conduct a test of the labor market for a period of 30 days, and then there is a cooling off period of 30 days. And those regulations come from 1952. They're that antiquated. They were last revised in 2005, and they're still quite antiquated. There is absolutely no requirement to recruit for any American workers as part of the temporary visa petition. I hope that answers the question.
It's great to know. It looks like, yes, it has answered the question. I think maybe unless we have any additional questions coming in, please type them in if you are curious. I think what I would like to know, Ellen, is, so going through this, it looks like it's something that isn't as complex as I had originally thought it was. But it does have an added layer of complexity. And so how, if you were, working within an organization and you wanted to, open up your organization to the hiring of more foreign nationals, how would you get started and make this sell?
I think most companies, it's just an open mindset. It's just looking at the resumes that are coming in and figuring out that if there is a way to hire this foreign national. It's probably more in the attitude. What can we do? How can we help? Can we see if these people are from Canada or Mexico? Are they from Australia, Singapore, Chile? Is it a foreign student who just graduated? Clearly they're authorized to work. There is very little paperwork we need to do for this process, rather than just having an attitude, we don't hire foreign nationals. And then again, reading that handbook for employers tells you about the temporary protected status, so you can hire nurse aides, you can hire lots of people at the lower level jobs, right? They don't necessarily require college degrees. And I think, I'm not sure if there are resettlement organizations. We had lots of refugee service organizations in Pittsburgh, and unfortunately most of them are closed. We have more volunteers who are willing to volunteer and help refugees than we have refugees under the current administration. And I'm sure it will change as years go. We're talking now in a very dire situation. We have a downturn in the economy. We have high unemployment in a lot of the industries, right? And we have several travel bans and presidential executive orders and proclamations that ban entry of foreign nationals in the United States. We have companies that have been waiting for high-level executives to come and work in the United States, and we were waiting for COVID to subside and for the consulates to reopen, only to find out that those visas have now been permanently banned until the end of this administration, for sure. And so this is not the easiest situation to have this presentation and to talk about how to hire foreign nationals, but it will end, right? And it's not permanent. Nothing is permanent, and COVID will go away. Eventually we'll have a vaccine and we'll have less of the social and physical distancing. So this presentation is sort of to give you an idea for the future. I understand that maybe today it's quite challenging, but it will not be the same forever.
Thank you. And we have one last question. I want to make sure that we get in. Does the U.S. just to be sure, what are the costs for an H1B visa on average?
So I put here even a slide so that you can see it. So I can't comment on how much different lawyers charge. I have not raised my charge in 20 years. It's been the same. But I put here the basic filing fees. So they're $460 and $500. And then the filing fee of $1,500 depends on the size of the company, whether you have 25 full-time employees. So if you are a startup or you're a smaller company and don't have 25 full-time employees, then that training fee is only $750. The premium processing fee is optional, and it's not always available. So the premium processing wasn't available this year up until June 20th for the Cap subject petition. So it's only available sometime, most of the time, but not always. And it's not mandatory. The $460 basic filing fee and the premium processing fee can actually be paid by the employee. There is no requirement that the employer pays that fee. And we also need to mention, nothing pleasant, but a lot of the immigration officers got their furlough notices yesterday, over 13,000 of them, and there are only 17,000 of them. So we are seeing that the local offices of Immigration Service will be gutted. There will not be any employees at each city office like we have one in Monroeville. So unfortunately, all of those people will go unpaid between the end of July or August 3rd and the end of this fiscal year, October 1. We have no information as of yet whether it will affect processing centers like California and Vermont service centers, and now Nebraska as well, that actually process different work visa petitions. So we don't know if their mail rooms will remain operational. They're operated by contractors. Hopefully they will. So I can't imagine that the H1B petition would cost you more than $6,000. Again, I didn't put the filing fees, the attorney fees here, but it's not something that is more than what you would pay an outside recruiter to find you an employee you're looking for.
Well, we have one last question. We'll see. Has there been any experience of pressure for non-immigrant visa clients to not transition to longer term visas like H or green card?
I think different companies have very different immigration policies, right? So some companies say you have to work for 6 months or a year before we would sponsor you for a green card. Some companies may say you have to work for 3 years. I think in today's world where there is a very much shortage of highly skilled employees, they have an upper hand. So I am seeing companies starting paying for family members' benefits and for family members' petitions, and I'm seeing companies much more willing to sponsor them for green cards, because extending visa every 3 years is a headache. If you have to spend that much money every 3 years, you might as well just apply that same amount of money for the green card and be done with it. Mm-hmm. Some companies say, well, why would I sponsor an employee for the green card? They're just going to leave. But we don't see necessarily, if the company is a good employer and a good place to work, employees don't leave, and they stay there, and we see plenty of that. And if they're unhappy or they want to move to a different place in the country, you know, we see that. But a lot of the times people really enjoy living in Pittsburgh. It's a great place for families. And so I don't see a huge departure once the employee secures a green card status.
Well, thank you so much, Ellen. Just to everyone that that is still submitting questions, we'll get those over to Ellen. And I know Sabrina wanted to close us out.
Thank you so much, Laura, for hosting today. And I just wanted to personally thank Ellen for your partnership with Vibrant Pittsburgh and the support that you bring to our community. We value having you here in this region and this really vital information that you share as a resource to us all. And so we look forward to continuing our partnership and working with you as we really forge a pathway forward.
Thank you so much, Sabrina. Thank you. We really need it here. And thank you so much, everybody, for joining us today. And we will continue the presentations with more detailed sessions, and we're happy to answer any of your questions. Thank you for all of the work that you do. Be safe, be well, enjoy the summer.
Thank you, everyone. If you have any questions about our webinar series, please do submit them to me at laura.m@vibrantpittsburgh.org. And if you have any questions for Ellen, you can either submit them directly to her or to me. I'm going to be stopping recording now. We're ending our session. Thank you so very much for being with us today, and we look forward to having future webinars for resilience through equity. Thank you.